Welcome and good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. Now, we've heard the phrase, Africa is rising. It was a huge buzz phrase a few years ago. It was a testament to the potential that has always been there, but was now getting the world's attention. From new road networks to airports, the race to grow Africa's infrastructure to a world-class level was on. However, another vast expansion is also happening on the continent, and that is of digital services. We're getting wired up, so to speak, and that is attracting big names in tech, as well as a rise in tech startups across Africa. Well, today on this edition of Africa Frontiers of Innovation, brought to you by Canon, we talk about Africa's digital transformation, the challenges, the opportunities, and the progress that we've made so far. I'm Victoria Rubadiri. I'm a broadcast journalist based out of Nairobi, Kenya, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. For those of you joining us today on LinkedIn or on Facebook, feel free to field your questions to any of the panelists throughout the discussion, and that will be in the comment section on LinkedIn and on Facebook, and also let us know where you're joining us from. We'd love to hear from you throughout the discussion. So without further ado, let me introduce my distinguished panel. We have Wuraola Jinadu from Nigeria. She is the co-founder and CEO of Wobston Business Services Limited, which is a technology and business consulting services firm. We also have Randolph Owusu from Ghana. He's a software developer and technology entrepreneur. He founded BISA, which means ask in the Ghanaian language of Twi. Well, BISA is a telemedicine platform that gives the public access to doctors and health information using mobile devices. We also have Jesse Muraya from Kenya. He's a technology enthusiast who wears several hats. He is a managing director of Pong Agencies Limited, which is a leading ICT system solutions company in East Africa. He's also the CEO of Cosmos Trading Company Limited. That is a construction firm. And last but not least, Ben Roberts, also based out of Kenya, the Liquid Telecoms Group Chief Technology and Innovation Officer. He comes with over 20 years experience across a range of technologies in design, in support, integration, and operational management roles. He has led the group's networking and product strategy, expanding its technology base and fiber network across the continent. Thank you all for joining me. Let's begin by kind of setting the stage to see where we're at in terms of technology infrastructure, which really kind of serves as the base for more of what we'll be discussing throughout this session. And so, Ben, we know that when it comes to digital maturity, Africa lags behind quite significantly to other players globally. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've seen when it comes to Africa's digital transformation?
Thanks, Victoria. Let's start with infrastructure. Starting point, Africa is obviously many countries, and each country is at different stages with infrastructure. And you look at countries like South Africa and Kenya, which are doing pretty well, already having 5G networks launching, having large, diverse, multiple players with fiber optic networks. More than 4 different subsea cables. Comparing to, on the extreme side, South Sudan, for instance, which only first got a subsea or a fiber optic cable, reached it only last year, which we managed to complete just before the pandemic hit. So, a massive disparity. And even Ethiopia, which is now starting to open up, and Safaricom have been awarded a license there. Although it has networks, it's been very tightly regulated and controlled with a single monopoly entity, which has really held back a lot of digital transformation because I think monopolies don't act very efficiently. A varying spectrum of readiness of infrastructure for digital transformation. But in the places that are ready and have been ready for a while, we've been seeing things kicking off slowly. And I live in Kenya, and I came here in about 2013, and back to the readiness of networks and cloud and things like this. A lot of applications for digital transformation are hosted in cloud platforms. But when in 2013 things were not ready, the reliability wasn't there. The applications themselves didn't work well enough with long latency links, very, very distant links from Africa to Europe. What's happened since then is that big cloud providers have been coming to the African continent. The applications themselves have been getting better. And I've been saying since 2015, Kenya at least has been ready for digital transformation. And it's been happening, but really with what happened in 2020, around March 2020, we've seen an upturn in a curve of acceleration of digital transformation, kicked off by the humans having to change their way of doing things. So we had, the infrastructure, we had technology available, we had a lot of the skills and people who are implementing stuff and great IT people. But the users in a business were very much liking doing things with passing paperwork around the office and stuff. So being forced to go into home working has really pushed the journeys for many companies who were already starting on digital transformation to go faster. It's pushed us in our home lives to change the way that we work, play and interact with our friends, and we wouldn't have been doing this, like this on a video conference 2 years ago. That's just become part of the norm. But other things have come in. E-commerce has changed its profile, and people are buying more regular goods on e-commerce. We're just seeing, a lot of sectors. Healthcare is moving really fast in transformation and education. So even religion and worship, move to digital platforms. So something that has been 2,000 years old, had to transform in 2020. So it is quite an interesting time to see things like that happening.
Absolutely. I mean, the pandemic certainly has served as an accelerant when it comes to adoption of different digital services, or just this general transformation we're seeing across the continent. And Wura, let me bring you in on that because, Ben kind of painted a picture of where we're at in terms of infrastructure, in terms of kind of moving to this new platform and this new way of doing life. And, you, during your time at Vodacom, did a lot of work around enhancing adoption of digital solutions, particularly for governments, parastatals, and private organizations. And while you were doing that, what were some of the challenges that you saw? And I guess, opportunities as well to onboard them onto, different digital solutions.
Okay, thank you very much, Victoria, for that. And thank you, Ben, for setting the scene. Yes, I'd say that the private sector roles and experiences in the digital transformation journey in Africa as a whole has, been very varied. However, one thing, we can't deny is the widespread of digital technology, combined with innovations, has been one of the most striking African stories over the past 15 years today. And even though the public sector has played a key role, in terms of enabling policies and regulatory frameworks, development of some e-government services, etc. The role of the private sector has also been clearly crucial to the evolving ecosystem. I mean, a lot of private sectors, companies have taken the lead role in rolling out infrastructure, digital platforms, mobile technologies, whilst also harnessing the disruptive innovations to continue to bridge the digital divide in our everyday lives. And as a matter of fact, there is this World Bank prediction that by 2030, every person's businesses and governments on the African continent should be digitally enabled. And this is also a prediction that is largely to be led by the private sector. So far, so just to touch on, some of the notable achievements so far in the journey and opportunities, the growth. I'll start with the growth of mobile data traffic across the continent. This has grown by about 20 times in the last 5 years. The entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystem have also grown so much in the past years. Some of the disruptive verticals that we see today are in the finance, the agriculture, education, healthcare, etc. For example, we at Wapstein today are currently harnessing our digital capabilities to build a solution that would improve the credit culture in Nigeria. And we also cannot take away the fact that the ecosystem stakeholders, are playing a very key enabling role in the whole process. So you have the accelerators that are on the uprising today, the incubators, the venture capitalists, providing resources to us in Africa, around all around the globe. And also the ability to leapfrog has been a clear accelerator of the digital journey in Africa today. An interesting story is what Safaricom's M-Pesa is doing in Kenya today. I mean, there's a news today now that they're trying to partner with Amazon. And I can imagine, what it is that they will be cooking, in terms of reaching the digitally excluded people on the last miles of the population. And then, there's also a widespread adoption of the digital finance that we have today, which is popularly known as fintech. It's clearly evolving as the financial and social inclusion driver, with homegrown payments everywhere. Look at what the likes of Paystack, Flutterwave, etc. are doing, using local solutions to solve local problems. And finally, I'd say that our young population is also a big plus to us. If you look at what the evolving technology hubs that we have across Africa, I think by now we have around 400, and 3 of them have actually gained international recognition, which is Lagos, Nigeria, Nairobi, Kenya, and Cape Town. And of course, the story is not entirely living in paradise. We still have some big challenges, which is something I believe Ben also touched on, around the poor infrastructure. Today, less than 30% of Africans have access to internet. So unless we're able to fix, the underlying infrastructure, then we'll still have a 70% digital divide. And the UN also estimates, that we need around $109 billion to achieve the universal affordable internet coverage across the continent. We also need to see, government stepping up in terms of modernizing the policies and frameworks, so that this is not actually impeding on the innovations that can drive the right impact. And then, thirdly, the venture financing as well across Africa, is still largely limited to just 3 countries today, which is Nigeria, South Africa, and Kenya. I believe that more collaboration on a regional level to create visibility and awareness for other countries would also help. And then, the digital adoption amongst businesses and government is still very slow, because we have challenges of poor infrastructure that cannot be overemphasized, low buying power, digital illiteracy and awareness. And I just believe that we need to start stepping up in that area. We really need to start looking at how we can drive digital literacy in that regard. And, lastly, just like I'm going to just build on my point earlier around the fragmented African market. At this point, we really need to start looking at how we can make very strong collaborations, regional digital market barriers, and develop like an African critical size digital champions. I know that the African Union and some other development agencies are doing a lot already. They're being proactive in that regard, but from the private sector level as well, we need to start looking at how we can collaborate better. And just to summarize my thoughts so far, I'd say that all of these suggestions and recommendations can really only be achieved by, collective leadership and commitment of all relevant stakeholders, starting with the development institutions to government and the private sector of the continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wura, and a lot to unpack there. You've raised some of the issues that exist. You know, and I want to kind of zero in on the issue of the mobile ecosystem. You know, that's a huge part of Africa's digital story. It's linked to it. It's dependent on it. We've seen great success stories coming out of, and you mentioned this, Wura, Kenya with M-Pesa. And Jesse, let me bring you in on that. In terms of how much more opportunities can we tap into in that space? And what are local developers kind of working on now in Kenya and the region?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Victoria, and thanks Ben and Ura as well for just setting the scene. Yeah. So in terms of mobile, I think Kenya plays a very interesting case study. I think one of the previous speakers just mentioned about the fact that in Africa we've had the opportunity of leapfrogging a lot of these technologies. And I think for Africa and for Kenya specifically, we've been able to leapfrog, all the way directly to mobile. And that's because of, some of the innovations that have been happening around. And there are various reasons you can give for that. I guess number one is, access to the internet, for example. I think in Kenya, for example, we do have one of the highest mobile internet penetration rates. Some of the figures throw it around almost 95, 98%. That's very close to 100%. So that really has enabled, a lot of innovation, a lot of solutions around that. And I think one of the biggest beneficiaries of that is the youth. And I'd like to concentrate a bit about the youth because, first of all, what perhaps not mentioned about me is I do represent, I am a leader within the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce as a youth and business leader. And one of the core roles that I do is in terms of just being able to bring together young people and helping represent their various interests. And that means that I end up working a lot with a lot of young innovators, and a lot of them actually happen to be in technology. Which is, I think, part of the reason for this conversation. So what I was saying is that, yeah, we've been able to leapfrog quite a bit in terms of what's been worked on. So look at, I think fintech has been mentioned before. There are a lot of developers creating solutions based directly, on a mobile first sort of basis. So you'll find that most people will not create, for example, when it comes to specific technologies, most people will not create web applications. They'll first go directly to mobile and create mobile applications so that people can be able to help leverage that. And, very interesting solutions around things like agriculture, for example. Agribusiness is very, very big right now, agri-tech. You've got other solutions that are purely based on being able to get, markets, goods to the market, for example. So that's things to do with e-commerce solutions. So we have quite a lot happening around that space, and that all is hosted by a very enabling sort of infrastructure that has happened. And I think the government has also helped support this actually by creating an enabling environment. So, for example, we were one of the first, I guess, African countries in Kenya to get, a fiber link coming from the sea into Kenya, and I think that played a very huge role on just being able to democratize the access to internet in Kenya. And then that coupled with the government also, maybe closing a blind eye and allowing M-Pesa also to operate without over-regulation by the financial sector. So bringing in the internet connectivity, the access to mobile devices and the access to, fintech applications like M-Pesa has really, really helped us leapfrog that. I think the only thing is that now I think that also poses a bit of a challenge in that we need, I think, as an African continent, we need to move a notch above that. Okay, fine, we can be able to access various applications. We can do a lot of collaboration. We can do a lot of productivity to the mobile phone. But, that is not it. I think there's a need for improving our skills so that we can be able to go a notch above that. So that we can be able to just, take up more interesting sort of use cases and applications and learn better. So, for example, if you look at the e-learning that has been going on, especially since COVID started, okay, we've had a lot of challenges, for example, like universities, institutions, in terms of people being unable to actually, participate in the learning initiatives of those universities, and that's just basically because they've been trying to log in to those online classes on their mobile phones. So imagine if they had access to, larger devices, the tablets and the PCs. They had access to, more bandwidth. So for example, on the mobile phone, you're limited in terms of bandwidth. But if you do have access to, larger devices and a higher bandwidth, it would be much easier for a lot of those students to be able to access and continue learning. And that means that Africans, to some extent, in terms of education, not just universities, but even the lower education, we were left behind in terms of improvement and upskilling our skills in terms of learning. And we find that, we may take a bit of time to catch up in terms of if we compare ourselves to some of the Western countries that had a better access to learning opportunities through these technologies. So I think as much as we say we've gone very far with mobile, there's still a long way to go. And I think we still need to, go a higher level and elevate in terms of the technologies that we can utilize and the access to various devices that we can have. Yeah, I hope that sort of answers what you're asking.
No, absolutely. And you've raised a really important point, especially when it comes to the youth and engaging this young workforce. It's exploding. We're a very young continent, and getting enough young people working is the headache for so many governments. I was reading a statistic the other day that said we have to create at least 80,000 jobs a day to be able to meet the demand in the future. And so when you think about tech and the opportunities that exist there, Wura talked about the tech startups that are coming up. Those are creating jobs. That's innovation that's homegrown. Reindorf, you fit in that category. You started BISA and, you started creating for yourself. How much of an opportunity is tech in filling that jobs gap that we have here on the continent?
Yeah, so thank you very much. Thanks so much, fellow panelists, for your input, for setting the scene and giving us all that great input. So tech startups, the thing first you need to know about technology is that you need just a device and you need a very bright idea to be able to, have a job or be self-employed. So for instance, I'll use BISA as an example. BISA came around the time when we had the Ebola crisis, and people were putting out a lot of misinformation. And when you look, for instance, at the COVID-19 pandemic, one of the first trends that came up was misinformation, how you can contract COVID-19, how you can be cured from it. So there was a lot of misinformation. But then you have an application like BISA that we created that provides a solution, a technology that gives you the right information and access to health expertise. So for the youth in Africa, there are a lot of opportunities that technology gives the youth in different and various sectors. You look at e-commerce, if you are already selling a cloth, you can just build an application and make it easier for people to purchase those clothes from your company. So it's very easy. The technologies are free to use online. Thankfully, we have a lot of bigger technology companies in America and in Europe that have created all these platforms. We have WooCommerce. We have a lot of different platforms that will allow you to easily create and start up. Maybe 10 years ago, it will be very difficult to develop a website. Today, you have WordPress that will make it very easy for you to develop. So technology plays a key role. It's only the problem here is for people to know how to, they're educating and start some of these companies by using technology. But yeah, so I think technology, it makes it easier. You can sit at the comfort of your home, start a business and start, making money. So we started out BISA first, as connecting the public to doctors. When the COVID-19 pandemic came up, then the government realized that they didn't have any health platform where they could send out relevant information on COVID-19. So within a span of 3 months, we're already in partnership with the Ghana Health Service in Ghana. So, and they're using our platform to send out the right information to the public using their mobile devices. So technology makes it easier to be able to start a business and get the stakeholders to use it.
Fantastic. Ben, let me bring you in here because we have to talk about the opportunities when it comes to unlocking this whole digital transformation, and from the higher end level. I mean, governments and big corporates and tech companies collaborating to offer many of these services. So public-private partnerships. I know you play heavily in that space. So who are the key players that you see in driving this forward across the continent? And what opportunities exist? Wood had talked about $109 billion that will be needed, as estimated by the UN, for complete internet coverage by 2030. Not a small feat. So what are we looking at?
Yeah, thanks. In the world of infrastructure, Kenya has got one of the most successful public-private partnerships, actually. And Jesse sort of touched on talking about subsea cable that came to Kenya, but that was it's a consortium-based. Many subsea cables are consortium-based type frameworks, and then that has government and private sector as the members. I'm one of the members of that cable. So that was a very quite progressive policy from Kenya, and it was there was some Pan-African initiatives going on that were taking a very long time, and I think the PS and the CS at the time, got a bit tired of waiting. I think it got to the level of the president, I think, from the stories I hear, and they decided to do something about it. But not every government interventions in building infrastructure are not being entirely successful across Africa, and a few reasons for this. When it comes to building infrastructure, private sector are considerably better at deploying capital. We are better placed to get debt funding at good rates in many cases, and we're certainly better at building infrastructure in terms of building it more efficiently, building a lot of skills. In Liquid Telecom, we've got 2,500 employees, and let's say 1,600 of those are technical people, and probably about 700 or 800 are people who actually just build and maintain fiber optic infrastructure, and governments are doing projects where they get a Chinese vendor to come and build these for them, and then they don't quite know what to do with it, and then they get lost handing it out to companies to maintain sometimes. And I think we need to be a bit careful, and so Kenyan government did good things with making this PPP and with private sector, encouraging private sector to do that. They need to give an enabling environment. We have universal service funds everywhere where operators pay into universal service funds, and governments need to disperse them. They need to spend those universal service funds and use them to extend coverage. Kenya is doing quite well at that as well, and have used some of this universal service fund to put towers in rural areas, and another chunk of it to connect schools. So we've been part of a project to connect about 300 schools for the universal service fund in Kenya. So it's pretty important. Other areas that are needing to come up is around devices, not just infrastructure and telecommunications networks and towers and things, but it isn't around the devices we use. And we've talked a lot about mobile technology and mobile first usage. But for true digital transformation, mobile might be the first device that you get, but it's not the only device you're ever going to get. The first device I ever got, I'll show my age here, but you already said I was working in the industry 20 years plus, but the first device I had was a computer with 48 kilobytes of memory, and it was called a ZX Spectrum. But it's that was some time ago, yeah. But we are no longer. The average phone has got far more compute power than my first computer that I saved up all my cash for. But now if we're looking at sort of full on, digitally transformed lives, laptop computers, tablets, virtual reality headsets, games consoles, smart homes, this is just part of consumer devices. Then when we get into the world of business transformation, it's the level of automation and mechanizations using Internet of Things in machines for predictive maintenance, for improving agriculture. So, we have lots to do on the platform side of the devices, as well as my job, which is around infrastructure. But then we see governments as well. Governments have done some big interventions on stuff to do with devices. We've seen Kenyan government buy a lot of tablets to put into schools. So, these are the types of transformative thing. I think government needs to focus where they need their interventions. Sometimes a PPP can work, but that should be generally used as a catalyst to get private sector to start something off. Sometimes they need to get out of the way and let private sector do what they do best.
Oh, certainly. And I was just looking up what a ZX Spectrum actually looked like.
Okay.
I could see Jesse just getting into a laughing fit there. But yeah, we've come a long way technology-wise, in terms of what is available now. And I have to raise this, Uhura, because I know you're passionate about it. How can we lower or just remove the barriers to digitization for SMEs? And I mention SMEs particularly because they are a huge part of economies for developing countries. Here in Africa, it's 80 to 90% of the economy, SMEs. So we need to get them playing in this space. How do we get them to adopt digital tools much faster? Of course, earlier in the conversation, we heard about how we've literally been forced to do that thanks to the pandemic. But how do we get more and more SMEs to adopt digitization?
Okay. Yeah, just like you rightly said, they are a very, very important block of the economy generally. Especially if I use Nigeria as a case study. And one of the issues, or some of the issues that we see evolving in those spaces, and the reason why they're not able to realize their full potential in terms of contribution to the digital economy is, first of all, it has to do with the environment that they play in. How enabling is that? So, for example, all of these innovations that are springing up today by entrepreneurs, that eventually would become the SMEs of the continent. Some of the regulatories that are put in place are somewhat, crippling the ability of actually yielding the right impact. So, for example, you're asking a startup that just has a fantastic idea of disruptive innovation, to provide some sort of regulatory frameworks or, some sort of requirements. And I feel like, government still needs to play a very key role in actually just, supporting these startups to actually nurture them in a way that, they're able to actually just, yield the right results that they should be yielding in the environment. And poor infrastructure is still a big part of it. Yes, in terms of the digital infrastructure, the underlying infrastructure, we're still not where we should be in terms of, enabling some of these SMEs, these businesses. When you also look at what's it called now, the some macroeconomic factors, the instabilities as well, the insecurity. So these are issues that I don't want to go so deep dive into, but these are still issues that government can actually help to support the SMEs. Then in terms of digital literacy, today you'll be surprised that even when you're talking to a company, a small company, about how you can use digital technology to transform the business, some of them might be very skeptical about it because they just feel like it might just be too complex, or because they perceive it as something that is going to expose their inefficiency. So some of them still have a have their reservations about adopting technology to actually help them drive their business processes faster. So that's still something. And today in Nigeria, we have a large informal sector. So you have a huge economy that is not included in the economy because, they're just not ready to play in that space. They're just not ready to, adopt technology in terms of even for their financial services and requirements. So that's still something that we need to drive at scale, in terms of digital literacy. Of course, we can't overemphasize on the fact that interventions, here and there, and access to finances is also a very key part of it. So yes, you have government. For example, in my journey in Vodacom, we used to work in three key sectors, which is agriculture, education, and healthcare. Particularly in agriculture today, some of the issues that we still see is that government is putting in subsidies and interventions to support smallholder farmers, but it never really gets to them because most of them don't even have access to technology. So there's feature phones that they use. If we're able to digitize that whole process, we can actually include them in the whole ecosystem, the agriculture ecosystem that we're building. So we just need to spend more time in creating this awareness and then also incentivizing, some of the companies that are already taking the lead in, spreading this technology across board. Thank you.
Absolutely. I want to kind of go back to something that Ben had said, having government step out of the way so private sector can come in to do its thing. And, that's pretty much how your firm was born. Jesse, when you think about how you kind of filled a gap, it was a service that was being given by government and you came in to now offer that service. I've seen in some quarters, I'm talking about African countries leapfrogging to digital IDs to help accelerate access to digital government services. So huge opportunity there when it comes to service delivery from the government side and allowing private players to come in and offer some of that. But what more lies out there that people can tap into?
Okay, thank you, Victoria. In fact, before I get into that, I'll also just wanted to add a point to what even Laura was saying in terms of, SMEs being able to take up some of these digital technologies. So for example, digital transformation, that's a huge word. So can you imagine you going down to the grocery store right outside your house or the kiosk or the mama mboga? Mama mboga in Swahili ideally is the grocery, the kiosk that sells groceries outside your door. So imagine going out to them and telling them, can you digitally transform? Okay, you're going to be complicating matters for them heavily. Okay, but can you believe that a lot of these small businesses and micro-sized businesses were able to digitally transform during COVID? So I like to give the example of there used to be a lady who used to sell to us at the market. By us, I mean my family used to sell to us groceries. So that was, your cabbages, your tomatoes, and your onions. So when COVID hit, we could no longer go to the market and buy our stuff. Okay, so what did she do? She started sending us a list of the stuff that she has on WhatsApp. Okay, she would send us a list, at least on a weekly basis. You pick out the items that you want, and then, you pay via M-Pesa, and then she delivers it, either herself or she sends a motorbike to deliver it to you. So if you ask me, that is digital transformation, because she basically jumped from using, you coming all the way to come to her stall physically, all the way to using WhatsApp as a tool to be able to actually help her sell her products out there. And then can you imagine, even with that, that means that I could be able to refer her to somebody else, that somebody could refer her to somebody else, and they could order directly through WhatsApp and receive the payment via mobile money from wherever it is they are. So I think digital transformation does not have to be very complicated. You just have to think about, and this all goes out especially to SMEs, and that is what we also talk to our customers a lot. Ideally, you just need to think about what is your end game, okay? What does your customer want at the end of the day? Okay, and if you can use any sort of tool at your disposal, okay, digital tool that can ease the process, make it cheaper, and ensure that the customer is able to see you more visibly and be able to get the product at a cheaper cost and much faster and more convenient, then that is digital transformation. And that is, those are ways that you can be able to access those tools. So yeah, so I think the take home right now would be just just trying to give courage and encourage everyone to not really think about it as the cloud, the blockchain, AI, and IoT, not discrediting that, but those are tools. They're not a means to an end. Okay, those are just ideally tools for you to be able to access the solutions that you want, or to access your customer. But think about the customer and how quick you can be able to get your product or service out there. So yeah, I think that's what I wanted to mention on that.
Fantastic. And, I'm glad that you've given that perspective to it. It's about simplifying life, making it easier for people to transact, to interact. If it's getting the mamamboga, or the woman who sells vegetables from her stall, up online and reaching more customers, that is the benefit. It's including more people into that digital ecosystem. And I love that you said that, Jesse. And just to recognize some of the people who are joining into the discussion, we have Pavel from the Czech Republic, Shane from Australia. He even put the kangaroo emoji. Thank you. We also have Jakfar from the UK, Boychoko from South Africa. Please let us know where else you are joining us from. And if you have any questions for the panel, I hope you're enjoying the discussion so far and learning quite a bit. But Reindorf, let me bring you in here.
Yeah.
And let's talk about money, which Wura also said is extremely important to scale the business, to take it to the next level. And I came across a really interesting statistic the other day by Partech Africa that said African startups raised $2.02 billion in equity funding in 2019, okay? Big number. But when you look at that funding, 95% of it, as Wura had said some time back, was concentrated in 3 countries, Nigeria, South Africa, and Kenya, right? And so, you're wondering, how do we kind of get that to the rest of the continent? How do other players on the continent benefit from such financing?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Investment has always been a challenge, but I believe the 3 pivotal countries, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, they've been able to put out their stories out there. They built very good business cases that brought investment to all these countries. So having a piece of that pie or that cake, I believe, is for startups currently to begin to look at business models that work. For instance, if you have a fintech company, fintech is currently one of the big areas when it comes to investing in African tech startups. But there are other areas like agri-tech, where the people who really need some of these technologies are those who are not connected to the internet. The World Bank still says that you have only 28% of people on the continent connected to the internet. So, if you cannot get these investments, how best can you use the resources around you to generate income? So I'd use my company, for instance, where we don't get a lot of funding. We focus solely on bootstrapping and building models that work. So, for instance, we've built a system for the Ghana Infectious Disease Center where they're using to manage COVID patients. So we are now getting the government as a client of our project. It's not easy, of course, to get such public-private partnerships, but building models like that work, and also the African story in terms of countries that are doing amazing stuff in technology and innovation that are not out there. They should tap into the internet and tell their stories as well, so that investors can begin to look at countries like in Togo. I was in Togo recently. When I got to the country, one of the applications I was forced to download because there was a requirement was Togo Safe. So I was amazed because you wouldn't think a country like Togo would get people to build or to use an application like that. So it tells you that there's a lot of innovation going on in places, but the message is not out there. People do not know about it. So I believe that it's about time, ecosystem and enablers begin to put out this information about tech startups so that they can also get the light, because there are very amazing things going on even in Ghana and other parts of Africa. So I'll summarize and say there are two core areas. It's either you build business models that work and use the resources around you, because there are people who are ready to pay thanks to mobile payments. Mobile money is a game changer in Africa. So it's very easy to build something and get people to pay with mobile money. Thanks to the telecommunications, they've opened up their APIs where, developers can tap into and, accept such payments. So, look at the customers. We have huge informal sectors. Let's not leave them out there. It's easy to build a sustainable business that way. And once you're able to raise show traction, it will be easy for investment to come in, because investors are always looking for return on their investment. So once they begin to see the traction, it will be easy for them to invest into what we are doing. But I believe that there should be platforms now available for startups that are not in these three big countries to begin to showcase what they are doing. Yeah.
Certainly. And, we have a few minutes to go, and just kind of a follow-up to that question on funding. And this comes from Horatia. She raises it on LinkedIn. And whoever on the panel feels comfortable to answer, she says that investment is primarily to male and to white-backed or owned businesses in Kenya, South Africa, and Nigeria. So what opportunities are available for women-owned organizations? Great question there.
So I just want to touch on it briefly, if you can hear me. So I think currently there are a lot of opportunities now available for female-backed startups and companies and SMEs. When you just have to find the right platforms to look for funding. But Google is doing it. A lot of technology companies are doing it. Pharmaceuticals are doing it, where the funding is only available to female, African startups. So you just have to look for the right platforms, and you get such opportunities. But I think that gap is gradually being filled by a lot of different companies. I've seen a lot from Google. I've seen a lot from Bay. I've seen a lot from different companies for female-backed startups.
No, absolutely. And Wura, I just want to hear from you, because you play in this space as well as women-owned business, women-run business. What more can female entrepreneurs in the tech space? We know it's heavily skewed towards men, but how can they tap into this space?
Yeah, so just like Randolph said, there are quite a number of facilities and enabling programs that are going on right now for women. What I always say is for us to just focus more around, developing a business model that is sustainable and, can actually yield real impact. And in terms of access to facilities and programs, that's readily available these days. There's a lot of traction, even down to girls that are just going into the technology space. I have to talk at different platforms just to encourage them, because in a male-dominated world, in the technology world today, those are the kind of programs that can actually help you find your voice and find, your bearing. So yes, there's quite a lot happening for women today. You just, have to make sure that you also get your aspect of things right in terms of the business model.
Another question here from Boyd Shoko in South Africa. And Jesse, I think I'll field this to you. He asks, our company is ready to work with other countries, especially in Africa. How does one collaborate with foreign ICT companies?
Okay, I think this has two perspectives to it. You've got foreign ICT companies in terms of, big tech, the global companies, the Microsofts, the Amazons, the Facebooks, okay? So for example, those ones, have rolled out quite a number of programs in terms of just being able to, learn their various technologies. So, for example, I know, Ben with Liquid Telecom, they do work a lot with Microsoft, and they have been training a lot of, people in the continent just so that they can be able to take up Microsoft technologies. And we're also seeing that happening with Amazon, with the AWS, Amazon Web Services, in terms of cloud technologies. And we've seen that being launched in terms of various training for young people, especially. To know how to be able to be cloud fast and build cloud applications. So we're seeing that happen with the big tech. Now, in terms of intra-African collaboration, I think we still have a long way to go. However, I'm happy to see the steps that have been taken. I mean, we've seen for example, the AfCFTA, the Africa Free Continental Trade Agreement or Pact, which has been generating a lot of conversation around Africa in terms of how people can be able to trade, move goods and services around with as little barriers as possible. So I think if we keep a lookout in some of those conversations happening around there, I think we can be able to help promote, a trade within the different boundaries. And that means specifically with a focus on ICT. And I think ICT will help bring down a lot of those barriers much, much further. So you can imagine, for example, one of the biggest, for example, barriers is finance. I mean, I am exchanging the Kenya shilling with, the Ghanaian cedi, for example, or the South African rand. Exchanging that in terms of finances becomes a bit of a challenge. But with, technology such as cryptocurrencies, for example, that will be able to help bring down, such barriers in terms of movement of funds around just to enable trade. We've got other things such as, fintech with countries with organizations like Flutterwave, for example. You have a lot of people building solutions around Flutterwave all over the continent. So that means that it will be much easier in the future to move funds in and out of various countries. So all that will just help enable trade and bring down a lot of the barriers. So in terms of even ICT, I think that's an opportunity for a lot of us in the tech sector to just look at various ways that we can be able to leverage on that AfCFTA and help bring down the barriers using technology so that we can collaborate better. And I mean, look at the session that we're having today, which is on a Zoom session. That means I'm able to interact with our panelists from Nigeria. I'm able to interact with people from Zambia. That means that as we continue and as we readily acknowledge and accept this technology as our norm, that means it becomes much easier to be able to interact and collaborate better and grow and trade with companies all over Africa. So I highly encourage the person who was asking that question to just reach out, using the various technology platforms on LinkedIn, on email, on Zoom, and definitely there'll be some people willing to listen to you and ensure that you can be able to work together, develop solutions. And I think one thing that I like about that is the fact that I'm very encouraged by the fact that nowadays we're having a lot for Africa by Africa content, for Africa by Africa developers coming up with solutions that are built for this continent of ours, rather than just plug and play, picking things that are from outside. So all that collaboration, I think, will really help, build the ecosystem within Africa and help us, grow together as a whole.
Yeah,
Certainly.
I think I just want to.
Go ahead, Randolph.
Yeah, I just want to add just a quick comment on the collaboration. So I think one of the fastest way to collaborate with companies abroad is for you to begin to, look at opportunities they put out there. For instance, they always come out with challenges. For instance, maybe Johnson & Johnson or Google, or you look at Facebook. Once they put out some of those challenges and they are looking for startups, they let the people know the sort of challenges they are looking to solving. So if your company fits into that criteria, it's always a good place for the collaboration to start from my experience. So once there's maybe like an accelerator program, or they are looking at partnerships. So it's good to always monitor their newsletters and everything else. And once you're able to apply and you get in, it's actually one of the fastest way to collaborate with a foreign-based ICT company. So I think that is something for you to look out for, and it has worked for me many times. So.
Great, fantastic insights, Randolph. And just as we're wrapping up, we have about 5 minutes to go. I'll be looking at the chat section to see if we have any more questions. But this is really just a parting shot. You all play in the tech space. You all play in this digital transformation story and journey to get Africa to the next level. But what gets you excited about the continent's future? What gets you up, going, and just continuing with what you're doing? I'll start with you, Ben, and what Liquid is doing. And I guess also on a personal note, what gets you excited about the continent?
Yeah, thanks. Look, I think sort of touching back on the last question and also getting to what makes me excited. We've done a lot of very hard work scaling across the continent in terms of building infrastructure. But then when people are working in digital applications, as a company in South Africa, you don't necessarily have, a lot of the hard work's been done for you because a infrastructure that we've built is been connecting country to country in the interior of Africa. We're crossing north to south, Cape to Cairo, as we say. We're crossing east to west, Mombasa to Kinshasa, as I like to say. But and other routes across east west as well. But the ability to enable an entrepreneur to become a global company is what excites me. And I'm employee number 3 of Liquid Telecom, and I started we started in a small office in a satellite antenna room in Hertfordshire, and now we are one of the larger companies in the African continent. And our owner and chairman, Mr. Strive Masiwa, he was yesterday in the news. I think he's been in the UK for some time, and he finally got counted in the rich list of the UK at around £1 billion worth of value. But I couldn't even believe he was. The headline yesterday, he was the first Black billionaire in the UK. I didn't know. Much as I'm proud of my boss, I'm also ashamed that UK has no previous Black billionaires. But so it's very exciting. Seeing the possibility for other companies to come and grow like that across the continent is very exciting. But I'm really interested in agriculture very much and stuff to do with this upskilling the youth, I think. But agriculture is an area where if we can technologically enable agriculture in Africa, the difference, the shift in GDP growth that can happen from technology and agriculture is bigger than anything else. Because you look at the economies that we're in, they are, some of them are extractive like Nigeria, but less and less dependent upon extractive. But, very agriculture dependent economies. If we can make a 2% difference in someone's productivity in a nation by having technology in agriculture, you see what a massive difference that will be. So, and then my pet and most exciting thing I'm working on is around connecting schools. I mentioned that we've done this, but we've connected as Liquid Telecom around about 4,000 schools to internet across the continent, which is a tip in the ocean of what the potential is. And if we can, just in the countries we're in right now, we could connect 150,000, 200,000 schools and give people, access to, they may not, it may be mobile first, but, we can give young people access to, a device far superior than a ZX Spectrum that I had at the same sort of age that I had such a device. And then, that's for me what excites me. So it's been fun and I'm enjoying it. And it's always very nice as well to chat with people all over the world. And, as Jesse said, in Ghana, Nigeria, and home in Kenya. So, just this is enjoyable. It's something we didn't do 2 years ago. So it's very much, being able to do this without getting on a plane is perfect.
Oh, certainly. How things have changed in such a short amount of time. Wura, let me come to you and just your thoughts and parting shot.
Okay. Yeah. So for me, what I find that keeps me going in this space is how much technology is actually changing the way we do things. It's changing our culture in Africa, and the fact that we're beginning to use local solutions or grow local solutions to actually solve our local problems. Like, we're no longer dependent on, getting the Googles and the Microsoft to come and fix some of the problems that, we can actually use our technology to fix here locally. And I remember a time when I was doing my master's and, it came to mind that, okay, yes, I want to work for the big boys, but at some point, the international companies, at some point, I want to be able to drive, the change myself on my own scale, using this technology. And the rest is history now. What we're seeing is a boom in terms of entrepreneurship, people coming up with innovative solutions. Look at the hub that we have in Nigeria. I don't know if you know of it, Andela. You have a lot of young, skillful people there that are doing things that we never imagined, could happen locally here in Nigeria. So for me, and I think Ben mentioned that already, also the fact that we're able to collaborate globally as well, So now I can, just as an individual, I can look at what the seed accelerators in, for example, Silicon Valley are trying to do, or the kind of facilities and enablers that they have, for us entrepreneurs. I can do that just, by doing a little desktop research, and then I'm having meetings, and before you know it, I'm speaking to someone in Kenya that has done something similar on how we can, really bring that into Nigeria. So the journey has been very interesting, and the fact that we're excluded from all the revolutions that happened, and now Africa is at the forefront of the revolution, of the fourth industrial revolution that is happening now. And that's very, 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 very interesting. And so basically it's quite an exciting journey. It doesn't come without the challenges, but I like the fact that we're now seeing the challenges as opportunities and not problems. And today, for every problem that you have in Africa, the first thing that they want to talk about is how we can use technology to fix it, even down to the food insecurity now. The main driver and the main focus area is how technology can actually help, improve in those sectors. Same in healthcare. When the pandemic happened, the first thing we had to turn to was technology as well. Same with education. To continue the education process during the pandemic, it was education that had to be in the forefront of it. So for me, it's that alone, just keeps me going. And I just like to end on with my very favorite quote, which is the fact that Africa's digital economy, is really an awakening giant, and the world better look out for us. Thank you.
Yes, the once sleeping giant, quote unquote, is now awakening. Jesse, there's a question also as you give your parting shot from LinkedIn. This is from Moise Bete saying, what about education? I see a lot of developers coming from abroad. What about students, startups who want to learn and grow in this industry?
Okay. Okay, we have a good example. Andela has been a very great case study in terms of showing the kind of potential Africa has in terms of providing talent for software development and software engineers. So that just that has given us impetus and shown us that we as Africans, we actually do have the capacity to compete effectively with developers and with great minds from around the world. So for example, Andela, a lot of what they do is basically they outsource their talent to the Googles and the Facebooks of this world. So I believe that in terms of capacity, in terms of knowledge, I think we do have such an amazing opportunity here in Africa if we are able to just take it up. And nowadays, the technology, you can easily learn a lot of these skills online. You really don't have to go to the Ivy League universities. You don't have to go to the Harvard universities or the Oxford universities to be able to, learn what they're learning and compete effectively across the globe with them. So I think in terms of education, that's what I can add in terms of the capacity that we have. Yeah, in terms of my parting shot, ideally would be we have over 1.2 billion Africans in the continent, okay? And for me, I see that as an opportunity. There's a word that I learned some while back, earlier in the year in a course that I undertook online, called institutional gaps or institutional voids. That ideally, what you're talking about is you're looking at, a continent like ours in Africa, where we have a lot of infrastructural issues, a lot of institutional issues. The roads are not very good, okay? Our parliamentarians and our politicians are always bringing in challenges. Our infrastructure in terms of education, healthcare, again, not the best, but those provide opportunities for people who are willing to look for those gaps and take advantage of them and have an entrepreneurial mindset towards it. So what I'd like to encourage everyone is, look at Africa, look at the 1.2 billion people, look at the institutional gaps that are there, and look for ways to be able to solve them using technology. And with that, you'll have found the silver bullet to be able to help, first of all, your community, help the continent, and also be able to grow yourself in your entrepreneurial journey if you are an entrepreneur. So for me, I think that's my parting shot.
Fantastic. Your 1.2 billion reasons to get up in the morning. Thanks for that, Jesse. Reindorf, your parting shot. And there's a question that I'll field to you and to Ben as well from Facebook. And they're asking, data security is such a big worry that tech people need to address in the simplest language possible. Are there any deliberate initiatives by tech to reach out to citizens who may not understand tech jargon? Great question there. So Reindorf, over to you, and then we'll come to Ben.
Yes, thank you so much. So I think data security is a big challenge, and just like many other words that get lost in the sector as jargons, I firstly believe currently on a more governmental sector, governments have set up commissions now to look into data protection for companies to begin to tell citizens on what they are using their data for. For us, for example, that we are working in the digital health space, we put disclaimers on our platforms to let our public know what their data are being used for. So I think it will be also very important for tech startups to begin to break it down, to let them know what their phone numbers are being used for, information about their email addresses, what are they being used for. So I think that is critical. My parting shot, what keeps me excited about the technology sector is that I think this is like my 10th year in the health and technology space in Africa. And, I believe we've come a long way. At first, it was very difficult getting machines, but now it is very WhatsApp and the usage of Facebook. People now understand how simple technologies work, so it's very easy. I believe the future is very bright. I'm even more excited because now the focus is on social good, how we can use technology to do more good in Africa, and I'm excited as to where that is going to go. So, and I'm happy to be playing a key role in the digital health sector in Ghana, and also how that played a major role in this current COVID-19 pandemic in crisis. Thank you so much, Jen.
Thank you, Reindorf. And indeed, using tech for more social good. That's what it's about. Ben, I'll give the last word to you.
Yeah, thanks. It's just on that last question about data security. I mean, there's three things that come hand in hand here. There's cybersecurity, data protection, and child online protection. And, we've seen really good moves in Kenya, for the program from the Communications Authority regulator around child online protection. It's called Be the Cop, and it's really nice and put in such a way that, they're explaining these things to be accessible by children and the parents of children, to explain what that means. And I think that's, it's clear that we need to use simple language. Jesse said in the chat, we're having data protection laws, cybersecurity laws coming in across Africa. It is important that these are implemented properly. And we have a Data Protection Act in Kenya, and it's very much something that needs to be implemented properly, with the government acting more as a a guiding for self-regulation rather than as a policeman. Government is not going to be able to police everybody, and I think that is the absolute key. But a lot of tech information out there may not be relatable to both the cultures and also the mobile first nature of the African data user. So something we've been doing, last week, we have a platform with sort of training videos about this type of thing, but they came from an Irish company. And I was out refilming all these, and instead of having somebody in a computer in a fancy office block, I was filming it in a barber shop with someone with a mobile phone, making things more relatable and making them more relatable to the technology people are using and to the environments that they're working in. So we'll get there, but it's one of the biggest threats right now, and it's a very good question to end on. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to my panelists, Jesse, Reindolf, Ben, and Wura, for some amazing insights. Got us thinking about the future of the digital transformation here in Africa. And to simplify it, it doesn't have to be as complex as those in the tech fraternity make it out to be. Again, this is to help make life simpler for the average citizen. Thank you so much for sticking with us on this edition of the Africa Frontiers of Innovation. Keep your eyeballs on the Canon LinkedIn and Facebook pages for the next one next month. And we'll be giving all the details on who the other great panelists will be and the topic as well. But for now, have a wonderful rest of the day, evening, afternoon, wherever you're joining us from this planet of ours. Thank you for joining us. I'm Victoria Rubadiri. Bye for now.